Good morning, Mr. Mayne.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I think maybe Mr. Smith should sell her shares.
Mrs. Smith, I'm sorry. We've moved on to the next business, and Mr. Mayne can be heard. No, we're not asking you to give us your bank account number. I'm asking you to speak to Mr. Salter. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you've demonstrated a good example today of holding the line, and you've shown some strength up here today in supporting an AMP policy, and well done for doing that. I guess my first question is a bit of a criticism of you, Mr. Chairman, for not holding the line in terms of board succession planning at AMP and the reputation of the AMP. I'm just amazed that you allowed Meredith Hellicar and David Clark to submit themselves for re-election. You endorsed them. The whole board endorsed them for another 3 years. Now, I would have thought that after both sides of politics completely rejected any forms of donations from James Hardie, after the whole Jackson inquiry, after the massive settlement, after the ASIC proceedings and the whole embarrassment of James Hardie, that the AMP would have realised that putting up the chairman of James Hardie to be a director of this company for another 3 years was not acceptable and would damage the AMP brand. It was already quite macabre, I think, that you had the chairman of Australia's biggest industrial killer literally as chairman of our life insurance subsidiary. I mean, we're Australia's biggest life insurance company.
Mr. Mayne.
And not only that, I think she was actually the highest paid non-executive director in the country on $407,000 a year.
I've heard you, and I understand what you're getting at. As you would appreciate, our role as I'll come back to further questions, but let me respond to this first. Our role on the board of AMP is to look after the interests of AMP and its shareholders. And you know this, and you've referred to it, we have a rigorous approach to investigating and determining contributions to the board by each individual member, and indeed we examine with outside help the performance of the board as a whole. In relation to Meredith Hellicar, her performance on the AMP board was at all times as a very considerable contributor. She made a valuable contribution in all of our deliberations and beyond that. So we look at the position for AMP, and in that context I can only say she was an exemplary director.
Now, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that boards are naturally collegiate, and I appreciate that both of those directors may have been wonderful.
If you were to see us in action from time to time, you'd question the collegiality, but
so
we do have vigorous debate from time to time.
But this is what I can't work out is, no, it's actually irrelevant how they were performing inside the AMP boardroom. It's the damage that's done to the AMP brand by having the chairman of James Hardie on the board when ASIC, a judge has just come out and said that she's a most unsatisfactory witness. You could have sniffed the breeze here and just quietly facilitated a retirement. The same goes with David Clark. I'm an investor in all 10 Orco vehicles. More than $5 billion has been lost. He was the CEO of the company. ASIC's investigating huge amounts of losses. You would have seen what happened to Barbara Ward at the Qantas AGM last November when she got a 42% against vote just because she was a non-executive director. And then you didn't sniff the breeze, and you actually endorsed him and put him up for another 3 years. And it wasn't until you realised your shareholders were actually going to defeat him and force his defeat on you that you relented with a 2-paragraph statement. So it's a chairman's job to facilitate these things, and I just think you completely failed in your duty to sniff the breeze, protect the brand of the AMP, and now you've had this unprecedented situation of 2 directors having to resign out of embarrassment after you as a board have endorsed them and put them up for election for another 3 years.
Mr. Mayne. Mr. Mayne, and ladies and gentlemen, of course I appreciate that there are very deep feelings about this matter. I can only repeat that our role is to assess the contribution to the board of the individuals, and in both cases their contribution was considerable, over a period of time where the company required reconstruction and where we were venturing into territory where we'd never been. As part of the process of board assessment, we take soundings from shareholders, small and large, and let me assure you that the soundings that I was receiving in relation to both of them, generally speaking, were very favourable indeed. Now, I don't think there's anything further to be gained by proceeding further on this matter. Did you have another question, Mr. Mayne? I wasn't sure whether you... Thank you very much.